Today I'm going to do an unboxing, or actually a re-unboxing and overview of For What Remains, Streets of Ruin. Now, this is created by David Thompson and published by DVG. David Thompson, you might recall him from his Valiant Defense series that has, are solitaire games that kind of focus on or draw some inspiration from the States of Siege type series and deal with historical events. Excellent series. He's also the creator of the Undaunted series, which is like a war deck building, a World War II deck building game and series that is very good as well. Plus, he has other designs. This is one that came out in 2020. A little late to the party on this one. I picked this up at an auction at my friendly local gaming store, and it was unpunched. So I thought, well, let's crack open the box and take a look at what's inside, and do a little bit of overview of what this game is about, or what this series is about, because this is one of 3 games in the series. Each game has 2 factions that introduces 2 factions to the series. It has scenarios that deal with those 2 factions, but you can mix and match the factions as you acquire the other games in the series. There's 2 other ones in the series. So let's get inside the box and see what we have here. This is For What Remains, Streets of Ruin, and it's a good DVD box there. There's an insert here that kind of holds stuff in place, that has your cards for your different forces, and your dice here. The 10-sided, it works on a 10-sided dice system. You have your bag, which is going to be used for chit pull. This is a chit pull system on how you activate your different units. Then you get the rule book here. And this one is, I think the rule books are generally the same. I only have this one, but they have the different, units that are covered, I think, in for those factions. So you get an overview. It says it's 45 to 60 minutes. It also has a solitaire component to it. So this is not just solitaire friendly. You can play this solitaire. It has a whole AI system that's built into it. It's chit pulled to begin with, so chit pull is always a little bit, is always solo friendly, or usually is solo friendly, because you're pulling the chits and that's who's activate, so you're not having to figure out that aspect of when you're doing the AI on your own. So it's got the chit pull built in, plus you have an AI system that's in there as well. There's an example of some of the components in there. Here's the game board layout. It has basically modular boards. You're going to have 9 areas or 9 maps that you lay out to set up your map board, and it's a grid based map board. And there's 3 different types of generally 3 different types of terrain in there: elevated, difficult, and I think water or something like that. You got your different factions. Now, the factions that come in here are the Freemen and the Combine, and then you have the next in the series, which I believe is Blood on the Rails, has Echo and Soldiers of Light, and then from the basement it has the Earthen and the Order of the New Dawn. These factions are very asymmetrical. They have their strengths and weaknesses. This is based on a kind of a sci-fi post-apocalyptic environment created by David Thompson to basically give the world or the context or the background for why these factions are fighting. But generally, it's post-apocalyptic, and each of these factions are vying for control or fighting against control, in depending on what their factions' motivations are. Here's your characters, which are the different units that are in the game. An interesting aspect of this game as well is you have you can level up your characters or have different levels of your characters depending on what you want. It's based on a point system. So if I want to buy Put veterans in my force of this character, the rebel leader. They would cost 4 for a veteran. An elite would cost 6. And basically, that's how many counters you're going to have on. So if you just have a recruit, you're just going to have 1 counter. So it can basically, basically take 2 hits. And if you have a veteran, it's going to have 2 counters. So you have the veteran counter on top of the recruit counter. Once the veteran takes a couple of hits, then you're just left with the recruit. And their stats go down as well. So not only is it keeping track of hits, but it's also keeping track of capabilities. So the more you get hit, your movement, like from elite, your movement's going to go down eventually, and the like. You have weapon range. This is how many areas you can shoot across. You have close combat, which is going to be adjacent. You have range combat. This is the number of so close combat and range combat. That's how many dice you roll, and you're rolling these 10-sided dice and trying to get a hit over the defense of the defender. So if this guy was attacking this guy, which he probably wouldn't, but he would have to roll a 6 or more to hit a veteran. He'd have to roll a 5 or more to hit a recruit level person there. And once you get 1 hit, you get a hit. Then you just flip the counter over, and then, or if it's on its other side, you take it off, and eventually you'll get down to the recruit. And once it gets down to its last hit, it's off the board. And so, and then they also have special abilities, and there's a whole chart in there that talks about what all their special abilities are. And that's really where the system itself is relatively simple and straightforward. Where it gets some complexity is applying all these different abilities that all the different characters have, but that really gives it the flavor and even more of an asymmetrical feel as well. Here's the action tokens. When you draw an action token, so not only do you decide who your forces are going to be based on your build out, based on the scenario, but then you get to each turn, you're going to figure out which action tokens of those characters you're going to put in the bag. Because you don't have to put all of them in the bag. You put a certain number in the bag, and then when you, so you're basically determining, who do you want to focus on. So like, let's say if you had a sniper, for example, you want the sniper to go more than just 1 activation, you might put a couple of the sniper's activation tokens in there, so you're going to draw more from that character and have that person do more actions during a turn. However, once you pull something out of the bag, it's going to have to wait a turn before it goes back in the bag, so they just don't go in the bag every turn. So in that respect, you're kind of, it's a little bit of a deck building aspect. You're kind of figuring out who's going to have activations when, and you can kind of have it adds a little bit more tactical decision making on when you want to use these characters, how often you want to use these characters. Do you want to have if you use them a lot early on, they're going to have to sit out for a turn and then bring them back in. So it adds a lot more decisions. You have your normal decisions of moving people around the board and trying to get line of sight and trying to maximize your attacks, but then you also have this activations system as well. Here's your setup, and this skirmish points tells you how you're going to do a scenario, how many points you buy. Each of those characters have different build points or buying points. You have your setup, you have your terrain. As I said, you have elevated terrain, water terrain, and difficult terrain, and then of course clear terrain. So I guess there's 4 types of terrain on there. You have blocking terrain as well, which could be part of these. So here's gameplay, talks about gameplay, and again, it's not, and there's examples in here. It's really not that complicated, and as you can see, the rule book, they go through a lot of colored examples, which is pretty nice. Here's gameplay movement, and as I said, it's relatively straightforward. The part where you might get hung up a little bit is trying to figure out what these different abilities are and how they're used. It's got campaign, so basically you have these scenario book, and we'll get to that, but then you can play these in order and kind of do a little bit of a campaign game as well. And then you have the solitaire play system. And then this is background of what happened and how it all happened. And so you've got quite a bit of the background here. So when it comes to the rules, you're really only looking at 27 pages, and that includes 3 or 4 of solitaire. So you're talking about 24 pages for the basic rules, a few pages of solitaire, and with a lot of examples in there. So as I said, not an overly complex game, relatively easy to get into. Here's your campaign or your scenario book, which has a little bit of background there as well. a lot of background actually. And then you go into the different scenarios, and then you're going to have your skirmish points. So this only has a 10 build here, and you might have special tokens or objectives that go on the board as well. And there's your setup. Those are the boards you're going to use. And so you can play through this and get to, you know, the final scenario if you want, which is going to be a 30-point skirmish point. So it's relatively epic, I think is what they call that. You're going to have a couple of books here. So these are the two factions that are in here. Here's the Combine faction. So it's going to have a little bit of background on them, and then it's going to talk about each of these characters that you can use for the Combine. Talks a little bit about them and how to use them. And there's an associated card that comes with them that will explain what their stats are in detail. It's kind of, in that respect, it's kind of like a miniatures game in some respects. You have these area effects, like this has the flamethrower, and it shows how that's used and how you can hit people with the flamethrower. Some certain characters have these ranged effects or area effects that you need to have that template for. Then you have the Freemen. This is the book on them, gives them some background, and then this Grenadier has has an area effect, and goes an example of that. You have the Medic, Rebel Leader, Scout, and the Sniper. Okay, and it talks a little bit about what their special abilities are and how you use those. Then you get here's those templates that come with the game for the rocket launcher and the flamethrower, and I imagine the other games in the system has different characters that might have different templates as well. I would imagine. But that's how those are those templates. Then you have your map boards. They're double-sided. We'll note that it's cardboard. You know, it's fine. It's kind of stuff you see for like player aids. It's not the heavy duty or thick that you would normally see for a map. I don't know why they didn't do that. I mean, you know, it probably added to the cost, and since you're getting several of these and they're double-sided, that might be, you know, cost prohibitive. Plus, the bigger boards have a tendency to warp sometimes, and maybe they wanted to avoid that. But, you know, that is one of the some issues I think some people might have some issues with. It's not super thick, but I mean, it's thin enough where you can put them out together and maybe put plexiglass over it, and so hold it in place that way. But it's got several cards here, or terrain cards here, that you know, that you use during the game, and you know, they're fine. I mean, they're not the greatest graphics I've ever seen, but it does give you a little bit of a stark post-apocalyptic type feel of, and I think that's probably what they were trying to go for there. But as I said, you get several of those cards in the box as well. That is your terrain, and again, you're going to set up a grid of 9 of those when you do your game. Then you get your counters, and this is typical thick DVG. You can see the thickness there, very thick DVG counters, pre-rounded. You have some oversized units as well. And then you have your action tokens. Then these are the counters that are actually going to go on the board. And so you have all those for the different factions there. The black faction is, I believe, the Combine, and the red is the Freeman. But you have your units that'll be on there, and then you have your action counters that you're going to be pulling out of the bag, and then there's some oversized units as well. And the other factions have other oversized units, and not all of them, but some of them have. I don't think the Freemen don't have any oversized; they're just pure humans. So, and you can see there you have the different elite and veteran, and then they have different symbols because you might have multiple characters, and so what you pull out is the person that activates. You might have a couple of different medics on the board, and depending on what symbol, that's who activates. And then you got some special counters as well that are strewn throughout there. So those are the counters, very good quality counters. Let's see what we got here in the box. These are all the player aids. Here's the Freeman Coalition AI activation. So this is part of the solitaire rules. So if you're playing against the Freeman, here's how it, you know, activates. You know, and then there's a card that goes with this as well, a smaller card, but this goes in a little bit more detail on whether it's engaged or injured. It will do something, and then if it's not, it's just going to follow orders, and this explains, some of those orders. And so they're not double-sided because you probably have those on the board off to the side. And then you have the Freeman abilities reference. As I was saying, these are all those special abilities, and some of them you can see have quite a bit of text. So that's where some complexity might pop in here, is dealing with some of the special abilities. The rules themselves are relatively straightforward. Combined AI activation. So if you're playing against the combined, here's a little bit more of a description of the AI activation for the combine. And again, I'll show you their card when we get to that. And then here's the combine ability references, the text for that. Then you also have these force rosters, because as I said, there is somewhat of a, you can level up over time. Don't query whether you really need to do that, because each scenario kind of has a build out, so you might just use the build out. So what's the leveling really do? I don't know. Haven't really got a chance to dive into that too much, but you can photocopy these and keep track of, how you played through, if there's any notes you have or what happened, and you can keep track of certain characters and then maybe level them up or notes or stuff like this. So it has a little, somewhat of a role play or campaign effect that you might want to use in that game as well. And then you get to the heart of the game, which are these cards here, which, this is going to be the different character cards. Like for this Vanguard, this is part of the Combine. Here's its special abilities, depending on what level it is. So if it's Elite, it gets this. I mean, here it has the same one. But here's its build out, and then you have this movement, its weapon range, it's how many dice it does at close combat, how many dice it does at range combat, and its defense. Someone has to roll a 7 or higher on a 10-sided dice to hit this and just do one hit on it. And there's nothing really on the backs there. So you just have all the different cards, and this one, as you can see, has several abilities there. This is kind of the medic for the Harpy. For the Combine, it does repairs and stuff. The Hellfire. And see, as you can see, this one eventually drops off. So when it goes to a recruit, it loses the dual strike there. So these are all the different characters that you have in here. And you'll have these on the board, and, depending on who you bought and the build out. And then, when you activate them, then you know what their abilities are. Again, this kind of, to me, is reminiscent of like potentially a miniatures type game in that regard. This is a full-blown, skirmish game on a board. Then you have, this is the AI. So the AI not only is for the different factions, but it's for the different characters within the faction. So if you have a grenadier on the other side, this is what it's going to do. If it's engaged, you roll a dice and see what it does. If it's injured, you roll a dice and see what it does. And then if not, then you just do orders, and it's going to follow the same orders as long as until it runs into one of these things up above, engaged or injured. And so it's a little bit just like the nuance of the action selection. It actually has a nuance in the AI. It's just not, this faction does this. It's the individual units within the faction do different things during the game, during its AI phase. So you have those for each of the different characters, depending on which side you are going up against. So as I said, definitely a lot of thought has gone into this on some of the nuances of the activations and on the AI. Pretty nice there. And that's why I said this is a little bit more than just a game that, you can play solitaire, or you can play both sides of the best ability. I mean, there's a pretty solid AI system in this game that you can utilize, and really gives a unique feel to each of the different factions as you play it. So that is what you get in a box of For What Remains. As I said, there are 2 other games of this out that have 2 factions each. This came out in 2020. I haven't really heard anything more since then. So I don't know if this is, still being supported or still being pushed. I heard some favorable things about it. As I said, it came up in an auction at my friendly local gaming store, and I said, what the heck, I'll take a runner on it. So I'm going to try it out and see what's involved here. But love to know your guys' thoughts. It's been out long enough. What do you guys think about this? You like it? Don't like it? Found something else? Or it's the fact that it came out with the 6 factions and haven't done anything since then. Has that affected any of your guys' gameplay? Love to know what any of you guys think about that. And when I say guys, I mean everybody. Guys, girls, men, women, whoever. That's just my slang for y'all, okay? So, as always, thanks for spending some time with me, and love to see your comments. Thanks for watching.